Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Series 4, Episode 2 of Crystal's Complex Cases. I'm Dan Morris, Intermediary Sales Director at Crystal Specialist Finance. I am joined by two industry heavyweights. We've got the star attraction, the show pony, the tax wizard, that is John McCaffery, tax partner of Alexander & Co. And then we've got Roger Morris, who is Roger Morris. Freshly open to the transfer window and raring to go and just, looking to have a great session. So morning, gents, how are we?
Very well, thank you.
Very good, Dan, and thank you for everybody who has come on today, Dan. We've got certainly a packed agenda today.
Yes, no, absolutely. So I'll set the scene as we always do. So thank you, those who are repeat attendees, and those of you that are new, welcome. You're in for a great treat as always today. These sessions are very interactive. You get out of it what you put in, and again, there's lots to cover. We're going to cover more taxation changes with the budget that's just been announced. We'll discuss Roger's transfer is now open to the new market, and then ultimately what the market looks like, what we're seeing more of, diversifying your businesses, and just hope that it's a really interactive session. So please do use the interactive tool and ask questions as we do answer them live. We've also got lots of pre-asked questions as well, so it's definitely going to be a jam-packed hour-long session. So let's get straight into it, shall we, guys? How have we, I suppose just first question, just to set the scene, how have we found the past couple of months? Certainly, John, in your world, obviously it's been year end, so it's been busy. But how's it been from your point of view with clients and appetite and I suppose current movements, really?
Yeah, well, we'll come on to it. Budget was a bit different, wasn't it?
You know, it was like watching children in the playground. It really was. It was embarrassing, to be honest. I watched that.
Yeah,
I had to turn it off. It
like
was
that. Fair enough. I had to sit through the whole thing, fella. It was entertaining to say the least. No, busy as ever. Busier than ever, to be honest. People are still doing things. There is, I don't know if it's prevalent to my market, local market, or whatever. There's people are still wanting to transact. There are still entrepreneurs who know what they're doing and are able to make money in all circumstances. Winds of change are coming. The budget heralded some. Thing about the budget is whether those changes will actually stay in place if there's a change of government. But we do have a bit of a new regime going on in terms of property. Some things are still there. There are still some opportunities. Some things are a little bit better. Some things are a little bit worse.
Yes. Okay. Perfect. And just to echo what you said at the beginning there, it's busy. It's busier. It is getting busier. We're certainly seeing more and more people speak to us, interact with us, at events, meetings, everything like that. People do seem to be getting busier, but with more of the stuff which they historically haven't dealt with. So these commercial type properties for the seasoned investors looking to diversify portfolios. The bridging market seems to be on the up. Buy to let seems to be picking up slightly, but your hobby landlords seem to be staying flat at the moment, just seeing what's going to happen with rates and property prices. But as a whole, I do think there is green shoots of recovery, and certainly the market does seem to be picking up and getting busier, but not necessarily with the vanilla day-to-day stuff which we are used to. And obviously, Rog, we've seen, everybody will have seen, I mean, my dog's seen that you've left Tandem and you're looking for new opportunities, but you've still been very active currently and previously on LinkedIn and socials, getting the message out there in terms of your knowledge, your experience, your education. So how has it personally been for you over the past couple of months with the business, and do you have any insight you want to share?
Yeah, Dan, thank you. I think when it comes to education, we really did hit a theme that we started on last August with myself and Mark, first working with Simply Biz. I know you and I have done lots of educational stuff over the years with Simply Biz, and I know you really do lead the way when it comes to specialism as well. But there was a huge demand. We saw thousands of people either log on or go to Tandem TV. The videos are still there. I was, unfortunately, with the rest of the team, made redundant last week. My obviously primary concern is to get them into full-time employment. And I think with the underwriters and the admin that wanted options to move, that there is consultations going through. We were able to find roles, and a big shout out to the Cumberland Building Society, Dan. They stepped right in, and lots of other lenders for Mark and David. My fingers are crossed. I think those two will have options and choices. But when it comes to the market, I actually think we're right now on a turning point. Being in the city for the last couple of days, the belief is from the bigger lenders is this is the turning point now. The economy will start to grow. Interest rates at some point will start to soften further, though swap rates are maybe fighting against that. I do think the long-term positivity is there now. We're in a new world, a new norm. And I really think when it comes to buy-to-let market, Dan, is there is a lot of change. There's landlords selling, which is stimulating first-time buyers, but there's equally as many new landlords now thinking it's the right time to buy because the rent returns are better than they ever have been. And they're looking at limited companies now more than they've ever done. So if I was a mortgage broker now, I'd be really optimistic that though the last couple of weeks have been a bit sticky. I was with the top 5 lender yesterday that said their application count had gone from 250 a day to 1,000 a day. So the market, I think, is starting to begin to move. We will have a bit of slowing down over the May bank holiday, but that's the norm. But more than ever, education and specialism will become the focus. So Dan, coming back to you, if I was a broker partnering up with you and having you and Crystal on speed dial more than ever for those complex cases, how are you finding the market at Crystal? And what's your observations over the last 2 months?
Yeah, no, we're finding the market again buoyant, to be honest, and it is picking up. So we went into this year hopeful because, well, I won't be embarrassed in saying it, I do think it is a packages market because we've got the knowledge and experience and the staffing systems in place to be able to support as many brokers as possible during these times. Because historically, and again, we're not going to speak around ourselves or even how adding us into the chain is going to benefit too much, but essentially the stuff that packages used to do previously would pay for that dream holiday, to pay for the kid's 21st birthday party, pay for that new car. Whereas now, for a lot of people, the income is dropping circa 30% last year because it was heavily weighted toward product transfers, and product transfers are going to be a big part of this year. The stuff that we do, the additional diversification of income, it's paying the mortgage these days. So a lot of people which have historically had the luxury of ignoring the specialist market, ignoring the commercial deals that are coming across the desk, or bridging, which is just getting kicked out the door because they've been lucky with clients walking through the door for the vanilla stuff. It's drying up, so people are now having to diversify to get that mortgage paid, or to pay the bills and have their incomes at pre-2023 levels, and even when the market picked up, obviously after COVID. So yeah, we're certainly seeing a shift in brokers' mindset and in terms of what clients they actively want to help or even want to market. And there's that many specialists out there, whether it's us or somebody else, that can offer educational tools, support, marketing, support to help them grow their businesses. And that's really what every networking club in the UK at the moment seems to be doing. It's focusing on diversifying businesses and delving into different sectors.
Yeah.
So yes, right. I suppose coming back to just quickly what you mentioned previously, obviously the buy-to-let market, and it's, I suppose, kickstarting first-time buyers in the market.
Yeah.
We've not really seen any help recently for first-time buyers. Obviously,
Well, what I would say, Dan, is the help's there in a kind of a subliminal way. So if you take me, say I'm selling a house in Hartlepool at the moment, Dan, and as a lot of landlords, when the tenancy comes up, do you go in and do you refurbish? But the bathroom's never the colour that the wife wants or the husband wants, same with the kitchen. So sometimes it's actually not worth the hassle and sell it in effect below market value if somebody had lived there. And that property is going to a first-time buyer couple who know they've got a bargain. It's habitable, it's clean, but they've had a meaningful discount, and they actually know they can go in and spend 5 and it might go up 15. So I actually think there's a lot of landlords, and I know in the Midlands, that are going, we're going to sell. There's no point putting a load of effort in just to pay for the tax. We're going to be realistic in the price, and that will put more of those starter properties in the reach of first-time buyers, which landlords used to compete with. And what I'm seeing, Dan, is more landlords going for new build properties. But when on a recent survey on new build, the average LTV of a first-time buyer is still at about 83%. And if the builder is giving incentives away, instead of getting a cashback. They actually wanted to go into the improvements in fixtures and fittings, Dan, because they wanted Instagram ready, is what I got back from the house builders. So I think the government can't really do any more when it comes to actually how they can reduce house prices for first-time buyers, the stamp duty relief. But I think the effects of interest relief is stimulating the opportunity now for first-time buyers to buy at a price more affordable than they would have done a few years ago, would be my view.
Okay. So you don't think that with the impending election, the government might not want some goodwill in terms of bringing back something similar to Help to Buy?
The only Help to Buy did not increase there was no actually increased house sales. The only thing it did was increase the profits of the house builders. It didn't really stimulate the market at all in the way it would have done. If the government was going to do anything, they should transform planning regulations of that 1951 Act to actually have a fair representational split of the profit made when planning is granted. It used to be that, and it would go back into the local authority and having a lower cost. If you went back to that planning application, a typical house now you'd be able to buy for about retrospectively at a really affordable price. So I don't think that you'll see anything more from any government as it stands, in my opinion, when it comes to that stimulation in the house market.
Okay, perfect. John, as always, do you have any thoughts on that? I'm sure you do.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's a known fact. Landlords aren't particularly liked by government because on the Conservatives, they're not a big enough group in order to affect voters. For Labour, they dislike people who have secondary investments, and the government has a they have a missed view on the fact that they don't understand that if costs go up for a landlord, it will be passed on to the renter, as opposed to creating further capacity in the housing market. I think Roger's correct. I think there are certain landlords getting out, and there are now first-time buyers coming into buying those properties. But there's still a shortage of properties generally. I can't see any more tax relief being given in any way, shape, or form, to be honest. And I think if we do have a change of government, the situation may get worse.
Yeah. Well, we'll not speak around politics today, but no, I mean, we're certainly seeing, especially in my area, obviously up in the northeast, there's a lot more shared ownership style properties, which makes it more appealing and obviously, more affordable for people to get on the property ladder. So I think there was a figure out recently that in a lot of developments, 30 to 40% of the new builds are actually going to be shared ownership properties, which is a phenomenal figure. From where the market's been. Obviously, we've seen a lot more lenders move into this space. More recently, the likes of the mortgage lender have moved into shared ownership, and I think we will start to see a lot more lenders move into this space because it is a space that is growing. So let's get into the first of the pre-asked questions. Obviously, there's a new one that's just came in live as well, and everyone else, please do ask questions when something comes to mind. So first and foremost, Debbie Lavender has mentioned, and there's been quite a few of these, around the new changes in holiday lets. So need to understand changes in holiday let, as I've got a big case and clients won't proceed as unsure of impact as to whether to buy in limited company or personal. So John, can you just give us a quick explanation around the changes?
Yeah, so nobody knows the actual changes going into furnished holiday lets yet, because as far as I'm aware, the legislation hasn't been put out. What the headline is that the tax regime around furnished holiday lets is to be cancelled. Right? What that means is your furnished holiday let now essentially becomes, in most cases, a residential property for the purposes of tax. Income you get is property income. Your expenditure on fixtures and fittings will no longer qualify for tax relief through what are known as capital allowances, which most residential properties can't claim. And the disposal of your property or your furnished holiday let property business will now be at the high rates of capital gains tax, which will be 24%, or 20% if it's in a company, rather than the 10% that they may have been entitled to.
Okay. Perfect.
Dan, can I just give my my kind of viewpoint on this. When the government made the changes to holiday let, it was done for two reasons, right? It was not to stop Dan, who was running 5 or 6 holiday lets in Cornwall or the Lake District as a business, that the properties were rented out, if possible, 52 weeks a year. So when we used to go to Chapel Style, that's a perfect place, Dan. That was a holiday let run business by people who bought it following those rules. What happened during COVID, there was a lot of poshies who had a second home, Dan, that they couldn't go to, and suddenly decided to say it's a holiday let to be able to incorrectly claim the support that was being offered to people who were running it as businesses. But the second point was the unintended consequences of George Osborne's interest relief removal in that June 2015. So let's say John McCaffery is on 180 grand a year and he's got a buy-to-let in London and it's in personal names. He can't obviously move it into a limited company. John would only be able to offset 20% of the interest. However, if John suddenly decided to make this on a short-term let basis, one, he steps out of 156 pieces of legislation, isn't affected by EPC changes and all that nonsense, and he can offset 100% of the interest. So what happened is pre-COVID, about 1 in 40 houses in London were rented on that base. And what we've now seen is throughout the country is a significant reduction in hotel occupancy because people are circumventing the rules for interest relief. And the government now have the biggest shortage of residential properties in our major cities, London and Edinburgh. They're not trying to tackle the holiday let genuine people. They're trying to tackle that kind of loophole in the interest relief is what I would say is ultimately they're intended. And then in that crosshairs, it's the genuine holiday let people run it as a business. It's kind of a roundabout way, John. What's your view? Would you kind of agree?
I do agree, and those people are running genuine furnished holiday let. But we need to be clear: a furnished holiday let is not a bed and breakfast.
No.
So those people who are running bed and breakfast businesses, right? They're still trades. They would still get the reliefs available to them as a trading business. Hotels, same. They're still trades. A furnished holiday let is a rented property that meets certain occupancy conditions throughout a particular time frame and is fully furnished to enable people to enjoy it as a holiday let. It's a form of rent, generally not a trade. So yeah, go on, Roger.
No, and John, remember, there was a piece of legislation that a lot of landlords and brokers didn't pick up on that came in the 1st of October last year.
Yeah.
John, if you wanted to rent out your 3-bedroom semi in Wolverhampton to maybe attract some of the nurses and doctors there, you can't just do that in a short-term let anymore. It's got to conform. So you have to put fire doors in. You have to have smoke detectors and emergency lighting with all the signs. And that does negatively impact on the aesthetics and the noise that house will make with the doors banging and changing. And it's about £5,000 to do that. So the government have brought in some other quite stringent regulation now to, in effect, make someone putting a house on Air B&B, they've got to make it, in effect, the same standard as a hotel.
Okay, interesting. No, some interesting comments there. So thank you for that. And thank you for your feedback and your views. So next one is we've got a live question from Ray Buggs. So Ray, thank you very much for this. But I have a client that is looking to purchase a converted barn currently owned in a company name in which he has a 30% share. The transaction is at the current market price. I have found that a lot of lenders won't entertain this type of transaction. Is this something that could be considered? In a nutshell, yes, absolutely. No, it can be considered. So I'm not too sure. I guess this is probably the highest route that you've been to on it. But yeah, we've got an array of lenders that would do it because it's no different in theory to you buying a property off me at market value. So as long as that property goes through at market value for obviously stamp duty purposes, then absolutely fine. No issues with that at all. We've got a number of lenders that would look at that. Obviously, you haven't mentioned if there's going to be gifted equity that's left in the property, but even so, no, we can 100% do that type of deal. So after this, if you want to pick up with our team, then we can definitely look at placing it for you. Because like I say, there's no difference because it's two different entities purchasing it.
I just want to hear what John's view on John. Just what are the tax considerations that the lender and the client would need to think of with that one? Just Jan, brilliant. I do know you have lots of lenders on that. I haven't got a comment. I'm interested in what John's view would be.
It looks like the client owns the property in a barn in a company already. So effectively what's happening, it would need to be a market value transaction. It's effectively a property purchase. You've got the company then will be making a gain on the property, I assume. It's got to be a market value, and even if it's not at market value will be substituted for the actual value from a tax point of view. You've then got a company with a load of cash in, which I imagine would be liquidated, giving rise to a secondary tax charge as the cash is exited from the business. But in principle, if this guy's looking at doing a converted barn, if it's his main residence, absolutely. If actually, it depends on the purpose he's using it for. It may be more beneficial, depending on circumstances, for him to buy the shares off the other shareholders, because on that he's only paying 0.5% stamp duty rather than the full stamp duty land tax rates.
I mean, legally, he could in theory do that, buy it, so he's 100% owner, shareholder of the company, and live in it and rent it off the company. In theory, it's perfectly legal.
It is. So yeah, your issue with that is if it's his own property,
you would pay similar to when you're using your own holiday let.
Yeah, so you need to pay the rent, but the additional issue to that is when you sell that property, if it's in your own name as your main residence, there's no capital gains tax on it. Whereas if it's in the company, that you don't get that benefit.
Yeah. So there's a tax either way.
There's always tax, fella.
Absolutely. Right, let's look at another pre-ask. Roger, have you got your crystal ball out?
Yeah.
So Marcella's said, when do we predict the interest rate, Bank of England interest rate, to go down?
Wow. So if you'd have asked me that before American inflation came out a couple of days ago, I would have been confident to have said that it would have gone down in May. However, the American inflation is working against us. And then if we take UK inflation is a lot stickier than what we expected. So when we look at UK inflation and we look at what the Bank of England were talking about, is not really moving at the speed we want. And just bringing up the live sort of SONIA rates at the moment, SONIA now is really moving in the wrong direction. So 5-year money on SONIA on the 13th of December last year was about 3.3, and today it's now 4.13. So it's the market's moving against absolutely a rate reduction. If anything, it's kind of now indicating on 5-year money that we might not be seeing a rate reduction now, maybe until September, Dan.
Okay.
It's hard to predict.
Yeah, well, of course it is. Yeah, absolutely. John, what are your thoughts on it as well?
I'm not allowed to give that advice, fella.
No, not. Yeah, I never said advice, I said thoughts, but no.
No. The only thing, I've read an article that they're saying it might be pushed back till November, and there would only be one interest drop this year.
And what do you feel that might be?
No idea. No,
that's it. Well, we look forward to Roger's videos outside the Bank of England next time that there is a rate announcement.
I will be there with the RMTV, Dan. You've heard it first here. I might get you with me on it.
Yeah, Roger's rambles. Right, next question in from Aidan. So 70-year-old lady wants to raise cash and buy a house near her son with remortgaging capital raise on current home with a let to buy and also remortgaging capital raise on a buy to let. But she's had a CCJ for £3,000, which has been disputed, and the last 3 months' mortgage payments have been missed or paying normal from this month. It's a tricky one, that. So CCJ, fine. Everything else within that case is absolutely fine in terms of remortgage, capital raise, let to buy. The issue that we got is the recent mispayments on the mortgage. So realistically, most lenders would ask, and most specialist lenders would ask for 12 months clear unsecured to then look at that sort of deal. I would probably be more comfortable that they keep the nose clean for 6 months and then we'd be able to place it. In theory, now we would potentially be able to place it, but chances are that that potential will be quite low. So I'd say realistically 12 months nose clean, mortgage payments up to date. But as a minimum, I would hope for 6 months clean and no secured missed in 6 months. But it's definitely a case again that we could look at. Obviously, it's going to depend on what mum's income is because she's 70 years old. So I'm guessing she'd be relying on investment and pensions income. So as long as it's stacked up to something that we could look at, but the hardest part of that is the fact that the recent missed payments on the residential mortgage, why they missed and what's got her in that situation.
Dan, I've got a question from you. It's just coming from an anonymous attendee. Good morning, anonymous. They've received an email yesterday from Crystal about no packaging fees for bridging. Can you expand on that, Dan?
I absolutely can, and marketing will be sat behind the scenes now, rubbing their hands together, thinking it's working. Yeah, so Crystal, and to be honest, it's not something that we shout about as much as we should, or it gets lost in translation. But yeah, so with Crystal, as much as we do charge package and broker fees on different sectors that we're active in, on bridging finance, there is absolutely no fee to be paid, whether it's application or broker package fee at all throughout the transaction. So we don't charge any fees at all on a bridging transaction. Can't be any clearer than that. There's no fee from Crystal. Obviously, you've got your third-party lender fees, legals, valuations, but that's nothing to do with us. But as far as Crystal are concerned, with bridging finance, for the #1 bridging broker in the UK, we do not charge any fees at all. And why should we? Because there's enough proc there from the lender to not have to charge a fee and to get a deal in. If you look at the average bridging loan of £200,000, proc fees of 2% as standard, sometimes a little bit more, dependent on the lender, then we don't need to charge a fee. We're not greedy. We're not fee merchants. And touching on that subject, so whoever anonymous is, we won't be beaten on bridging. So compliance aren't on this call. And I need to say that on non-regulated bridging, we will not be beaten. But regulated, well, read between the lines. But yeah, on non-regulated bridging, we will not be beaten on a like-for-like basis. So go to any lender out there, any other provider out there, get legitimate terms, send them to me, send them to my team, and say, Dan, beat the rate, Dan, pay me more, I'll be cheeky and ask for both, whatever. We will not be beaten on non-regulated bridging. And we don't charge a fee, so it's a win-win. We'll do whatever we need to. Our MD, Joe Breeden, would rather die than be beaten on bridging. It's as simple as that. It's a sector that's close to his heart. It's something that we do and know very well. We've got a lot of exclusives with a lot of lenders. We've got a really good semi-exclusive with Precise at the moment, where we get an amazing rate, get an amazing proc, and we've got the opportunity to amend that and be a bit flexible with it if we need to win a deal. So please do, with any bridging finance deals, come and speak to us. Even if you want to hand it off on a referral basis, we can give the advice and you still earn the same amount of money. Can't get any better and any simpler than that. But please do try us with your quotes. Go to the other providers out there, send them to us and we'll blow you away, give you a great service. Client gets the money, you earn a decent bit of money, we diversified and we move on and build a relationship. So brilliant point wherever you are. Hopefully you're not staff, but we'll see.
No, I don't think it was. Dan, I've got one more question that I want to ask both you and John. And it's because this is a manufacturing requirement. So on buy-to-let, we're aware over the last 18 months, the interest rate rises. And as the interest rate rises, the ICR calculation becomes harder to achieve for the loan size needed. So in product design and innovation, lenders have varied the option from a standard maybe 995 fee with some of the banks and building society up to as high as 9.99 fee for all sorts of different reasons. And there's a lot of lenders like HTB, which will allow you to vary and work out a solution. So my question to you both, starting with John first, and then just Dan, your observations of where it's been the right advice and the choice from both the advisor and the customer to take, say, a 5 or a 7% fee. The property is in personal ownership. Is that fee let's say 5% fee, Is that allowed as a wholly allowable deduction on a privately owned buy-to-let in the tax return, or is the fee treated the same as interest relief, John? And then Dan,
So it's a cost of finance. The cost of finance is a cost of a business and is in the first instance a tax deductible cost. However, you're dead right. It is a cost of finance, and the revenue wouldn't leave a hole that gaping in the legislation. So if it's in personal ownership, it's subject to the same restrictions that interest is. So if you get a 20% relief for that cost, regardless of what band of tax you're in.
Perfect.
Dan,
Yep.
are you seeing a lot of, are you using that within the mortgage desk at Crystal?
But we are. As soon as you mention a big fee, then and put it into pounds for the larger loan amounts, then obviously people are turned off by it. But ultimately, for a lot of these bigger loan amounts, you have to pay these bigger fees to get the loan amount requested, because otherwise, with the difference in interest rates for a lot of these larger properties which aren't yielding as good as they could be, then it's just not achievable for them to get a remortgage or get the funds out that they need. So we are starting to see a shift in more and more clients doing it, but obviously it is very, very much case by case, and it's not a case of when you've looked previously. So when I've looked for a residential mortgage for myself, you look at, right, do I pay fees? Is it cost effective over that 5-year period? Yes, no. It's kind of as simple as that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because there's no stress from that point of view. Whereas if you're looking for a remo or even a purchase at these larger loan amounts, which is where it's the sweet spots for a lot of them, how do we get to the loan amount that we need on the basis of the rental? It is paying these higher fees, and it's as simple as that. So we are seeing more and more clients utilize this. And it's just, I suppose, outside the box thinking from the lender as well. So I think we'll start to see more of it as the fixed rates ends and people aren't doing PTs and moving away to capital raise for, I don't know, it could be home improvements, it could be getting the EPCs up, which obviously, as much as the plans have been scrapped to get EPC, there's still a lot of landlords out there that need and want to get it C and above, because that's what the new renters are wanting. They're wanting these properties, aren't they, which are more cost effective for them with the utilities. But yeah, in short, we are seeing more people shift to these higher fees because it's the only option for them to, or one of the only options for them to reach the loan amount that they need to get that transaction done.
Thank you.
No problem at all. Right, let me just get another pre-asked question. So we've got another holiday let one, which we've covered that because, well, the legislation has not been passed yet. Vasos, apologies. Do you have any lenders? There's more for me today. I like that. Do you have any lenders that lend on properties that have single skinned extensions and part of neighbour's property impinging on subject property? We do. It is a good question. Obviously, we've got quite a few lenders that have moved into the non-standard construction market, and that are being, again, a little bit more creative with what they're doing. Because what we're seeing from an adverse point of view, non-standard construction point of view, income point of view, lenders that aren't getting or meeting targets which they have set for the year are now having to basically take the food off the lenders below them's table. So with that, we're seeing a dominoes effect where people are starting to fish in different ponds to get the business that they need because the market isn't as buoyant, as we've mentioned, as it has been previously. We do have a number of lenders that will do non-standard construction. A lot of it, obviously, you're going to be restricted in terms of what LTV. So don't expect your 80-90% LTVs on these types of properties because it just doesn't exist. You'd be more suited at probably 60 to 75% LTV, but that's going to depend on valuers' comments, if I'm honest. So we can place these cases. We can place many things that are non-standard construction, but it's going to be subject to valuers' comments, and it'll sit at 60 to 75% LTV, and rate's going to reflect the risk as well. So from a resale point of view, in terms of, unless you're a cash buyer, there's not loads of options out there for lending. You're going to pay a higher interest rate for this particular property. However, options are available, but like I said, probably between 60 to 75% LTV, I will be comfortable saying. So hopefully that answers that question. John, you can't have anything to say on that, so we'll move on. So Rog, any hot topics that you've seen recently in I suppose the conversations you've been having in terms of what brokers are wanting to see more of, or what's come up in more and more of your conversations?
Yeah, I mean, the first is the sheer expansion of new bridging lenders entering the marketplace. If we went back a couple of years ago, Dan, and I think, again, the complement to what Precise Mortgages did, which was to start a lender in 2000 and sell and go for an IPO and end up with a value worth hundreds of millions of pounds, that other entrepreneurs are thinking, how do I do that? And it used to be, you start a bridging lender, a buy-to-let lender, then you go for permissions to eventually become regulated. And then you become a bank and you get capital and all those other bits. But now, because buy-to-let is restricting and the margins are low, people are now entering the phase purely as a bridging lender. And there is so many new entrants coming in, that marketplace will be crowded. I think my advice would be is stick with the people that you know and trust. So with Crystal, you work with yes, you can work with all the market, but it kind of, unless a lender has got a varied reason for be added, it's not about dealing with everyone, it's dealing with so many. So I think just watch the amount of new entrants in the marketplace, and that they might start to stretch the boundaries to what is sensible. It's great when you can have everything, but is that practical? I think we're going to see buy-to-let really come back strong. We're now starting to see confidence within the private rental sector of moving back, and more first-time buyers who have been in rented, who have been displaced, want to buy now, Dan, who will have challenged credit files, but you have lenders on your mortgage desk, Tandem being one, you know, a lender that has the ability to help people who've had financial problems. So more opportunity than ever. Just make sure your website is there to catch all these opportunities, and then filter and either advise directly or work with someone like you. So a lot of opportunities is the simple answer.
Yeah, no, there is, and just to touch on the bridging point there. So yes, there is more and more bridging lenders coming to market, but we've got to remember that we've just got to a point where bridging hasn't got a bad name. So historically, there would be seen as bridging lenders would be seen as cowboys. A lot of people will keep away from bridging. Even to this day, when you mention bridging finance to some clients, to some brokers, they get goosebumps and it gives them shivers because of bad experiences they've had in the past. Now, the panel that we've got, obviously, it's been vetted. We've done the due diligence, and we've got some great lenders on there which we work with. We've got lots of people knocking on our door, as you can imagine. But the panel's the panel because we know the lenders that we deal with do business. They're fair, they're transparent, and they get the deal done. It's as simple as that. But it is a useful tool. There's more and more properties that are going through auction at the moment because people want rid of them, or there's a lot more repossessions. And bridging's a perfect vehicle for that. It's as simple as that. And as mentioned, if it's not something that you're unsure of or that you're aware of how to deal with, bridging's dead simple. It's a case of 3 questions. What's it worth? How much does the client need? And what's the exit? It's as simple as that. Bridging's the easiest part of all the sectors that we deal in. If you can do a residential mortgage for a self-employed client, you could do bridging finance with your eyes shut. It's just a case of getting involved and just understanding what's available out there. And you touch on adverse as well, and there's a lot more adverse credit lenders available these days, and there's a lot more mainstream lenders that are taking a chance on adverse, because adverse credit, it's almost trendy these days. If you look about since COVID, people have had a tough time. We've had cost of living crisis, we've had COVID, a lot of people losing jobs, family members, and there's been just a chain reaction of events which have got people that have missed it, and people would rather now book a holiday, miss the credit card payment, and catch up on it next month. But that's going to impact your credit, and ultimately your finances and what's available to you when you do want a mortgage. But lenders are now starting to understand this because a lot has happened and a lot is still going to happen over the coming years. And they're taking more of a stance, which is refreshing. I'm not saying adverse credit is right, but ultimately, for a lot of people, it's a legitimate reason as to why they've got in that situation, really. Again, John, you're not going to have any comments on that.
You might think, you know, there's part of the bridging lending explosion is being driven by tax planning. There are providers out there who are offering what are called business property relief products for inheritance tax purposes. Basically, people who invest in funds have spare cash available, and they put it into a company or a partnership that does bridging lending. After 2 years, that investment's free of inheritance tax. So there are a number of providers out there who are going a bit bandwagon with this whole inheritance tax relief. I'm aware of a few of them setting up just to try and capture that relief. Because basically, you get inheritance tax, you get a low cost of investment because the people aren't looking for a spectacular return. They just want protection of the capital, and therefore that leads them to making quite tasty margins on it.
Okay, that's quite interesting. That is interesting. That's something that I've never heard of, to be fair. So, no, happy days. Perfect. Perfect. So we've discussed the taxation changes. We've discussed the market.
Yeah, not all of them.
No,
No,
no.
No, there's a really big one coming up, and we've got a small window of opportunity right now. There's multiple dwellings relief is going.
Yes, yes, I saw them laughing about that. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So multiple dwellings relief is going on the 1st of June, right?
Mhm.
So little bit of education. Multiple dwellings relief. If you buy a number of properties in a single transaction, residential properties, you can average the cost of those properties and you pay stamp duty land tax on the basis of the average price per property, subject to a minimum of 1%. But generally in this game, it's 3% because of the additional rate of stamp duty being charged on secondary homes. So what we've had is we've had a change of capital gains tax rates down to 24%, which has come into effect from the turn of the tax year. And we've got a multiple dwellings relief increase coming up, abolishment coming up on the 1st of June. So right now, if transactions are able, you've got a lower tax rate and you can still get multiple dwellings relief. Couple of things to be cautious of. One, if you've got a linked transaction, and what a linked transaction is, same buyer, same vendor, transactions occur at different times. If you're thinking about doing a claim now, but then you do a linked transaction post the 1st of June, the current transaction gets pulled into the 1st of June rates and you lose your multiple dwellings relief. And the effect of the loss of multiple dwellings relief is actually you pay stamp duty and land tax based on the cumulative price of all the properties. So let's say previously you bought 5 properties at an average of 200, you would pay stamp duty land tax on the basis of 5 properties at 200 grand. Now you pay stamp duty land tax from 1st of June rather on the basis of £1 million, which is significantly higher. The other thing to be aware of, it's been around for a while, is that if you're buying 6 or more properties, even residential properties, you can choose for that to be a commercial transaction. So whilst we may be losing multiple dwellings relief, you can instead state that actually I'll just pay the 5%, which is the maximum rate of commercial property, is subject to stamp duty land tax. So not brilliant, potentially not as disastrous as people were thinking.
But it was predominantly, though, John, incentivized for pension companies to buy vast amounts of property.
Yeah.
And what ultimately they've looked at and thought, well, yeah, the big pension companies aren't buying 3 or 4 and we'll leave them intact. But like, for instance, where I live in Birmingham, in Edgbaston, you might have, if it was an old house, a Georgian house, it might have a coach house that's created into a separate annex. There was a lot of people buying those properties and challenging that. Do you think that's been predominantly the focus of this change?
Predominantly, they are very much down on anti-avoidance at the moment.
Yeah,
the government, and when they do anti-avoidance, they always take a sledgehammer. They never take a scalpel.
No, but John, you know, where within corporation tax relief, if it was an individual who qualified for business relief, the capital gains, we were not going into that, but subject to being approval, the capital gains bit was all right.
Yep.
But they wouldn't qualify because it was a single for the stamp duty, the same as in corporation tax relief. And landlords who did move their portfolio into a limited company on an individual basis, they did potentially benefit from that
Absolutely did. Absolutely did.
What you're saying though is if they've got, as long as they've got 6 or more as part of that transaction, and it works out mathematically, they're still all right. But for those that are let, well, it wouldn't be less anyway, would it? If they were, no, that's very useful, John.
The other thing about that, Rog, and there's still this case around, if you've got a commercial property transferring as part of a multiple transaction,
Yeah,
it's a material part of that transaction and isn't included to take advantage of what I'm about to say, then the additional 3% isn't due. So it's just flat rates of stamp duty, land tax.
so I think that ends John's view of the budget, Dan.
It does. It does. So in a nutshell, what you're saying is if you're doing multiple purchases, you need to get it done before June.
You do need to get it done before June. You need to complete, and you don't then want to do another transaction with the same purchaser vendor after June.
Perfect. And coming on to commercial, so as we mentioned at the very beginning, there's more clients that are diversifying into commercial properties or properties with a commercial element. So it can be flattable chip shops, laundrettes, whatever, which we know in our game are harder to place with lenders because of the fire risk that's imposed from downstairs or whatever it may be need, because essentially they're on high streets or in, well, commercial areas. From a taxation point of view, is there a difference in how these are taxed from an income point of view or a purchase point of view when a transaction goes through?
Commercial property.
Yes.
Yeah, commercial property. So it's only residential property that's subject to the higher rates of capital gains tax. So commercial property would be subject to a 20% rate of capital gains tax. The other thing you have to watch with commercial properties is VAT. So if the commercial property has been opted to tax, which means that it is required to charge VAT on rental streams and similar. Yeah. And the reason you do that is either because you've incurred a lot of fit out you want to recover the VAT on, or you bought it off somebody who'd opted it and therefore you've got to opt it in order to recover the VAT. You need to make sure that when you're purchasing those kinds of properties that you're having an eye to the VAT. If you can't recover the VAT, then it adds another 20% to your purchase price. It actually adds slightly more because you've then got to pay stamp duty and land tax on the VAT element as well. The VAT may not be charged if you buy the property as part of what's called a going concern. So as part of an ongoing business that you're going to continue and you're VAT registered. So commercial property, if you buy a commercial property with an incumbent tenant, then the VAT might not be due if you continue with charging rent and charging VAT on the rent and that kind of thing. Stamp duty land tax rates are different on VAT. As I said before, first 150 is free of SDLT, the next 100 is at 2%, and then it's flat rate of 5% thereafter. Also, which is useful from a tax planning point of view, pensions can buy commercial property and they can't buy residential property. So there's a lot of tax planning that can be done, getting cash out of pensions by doing a sale to the pension. Your company then may charge, or you would receive rent tax-free into the pension. If you happen to own the company paying the rent, that's corporation tax deductible. Excuse me, but pensions do still pay stamp duty land tax. And if the property is opted, pensions can opt and pensions can pay that as well. Okay,
but you can only, am I right in saying you can only lend up to 50% of the pension pot?
So if you're looking to purchase property into your pension pot, you've got your cash on your investment in your assets, but the pension can borrow 50% more to finance the purchase of the property.
Perfect. And just from a VAT point of view, in a reclaim, if a commercial property is being purchased, so let's say it's a warehouse, but it's going to get converted into residential.
Yeah.
How would that work on a reclaim point of view? If would it then be would it qualify then to be able to make a reclaim because it's not going to be used as commercial because the change of use is going to be submitted once it's converted?
Yeah, it's you reduce down your rate of VAT on the cost of your works done. So it's slightly different and slightly different depending on a lot of nuances. But essentially, instead of you being VATable, so what you do is you go and then the way VAT works is basically you get costs in that have VAT, and you can recover them if you're selling something that has VAT on it. Yeah. So you're not actually paying the tax. What you're doing is you're collecting the tax on behalf of when you make your sale and paying the tax when you make your purchase, right? Now, in certain circumstances, like the one you just mentioned, the revenue say, instead of you paying the VAT when you make your purchase, you've got to convince your suppliers that actually there's no VAT to be charged, right? So when you're doing that conversion, it's called zero rating, and you go to your suppliers and go, right, I fall into this particular exemption, don't charge me VAT. Yeah. If you try to recover the VAT, that's not allowed, because if you're keeping that property to convert it and then rent it out, you're not making a VATable supply.
Right.
Does that make sense? That was quite techie.
Kind of, yeah. I'll listen to this over and over again, and then I'm sure it will make sense. But no, thank you for that answer. So yeah, brilliant. And just before we start wrapping up, 'cause I'm conscious that we've got 7 minutes left. Is there any other questions that people have? I mean, it's not been the most interactive session, but there has been some great content in there. There's been some great pre-asked questions. A couple of live ones came in, but yeah, I think there's been a lot that we have discussed, gone over. Obviously, we've got the Budget King there, the Tax Wizard. So if you do have any more questions, then please do ask them. And Roger, everyone's going to want to know, but what's next for Roger Morris? Obviously, you're the king of LinkedIn, Mr. Social Media. You love a selfie stick. I'm pretty sure you'll probably have a drone now. But what's next on the radar for you?
Just wanted to say really thank you for how many messages. I think over the last week I've had something about just under 100,000 views on the messages that we had to put out. My last duty at Tandem was to make sure that Richard, Mark and David have secured employment. I'm pretty convinced by next week we should have achieved that. And for the displaced underwriters, the Cumberland Building Society. So when I was able to put up that post on Tuesday saying, I actually haven't got an iron in the fire, it's been different to last time. And I am starting now to begin those conversations to try and find something that really allows me to add value to a business, whether that be in distribution or that it's in lending, or maybe even set up on my own. I don't know, Dan, but I am on that journey, and I literally have got the diary full of meetings and webinar sort of teams or face-to-face. And if there's anybody out there that knows of any opportunity, then just please, as they have been doing, lend me on LinkedIn or by email. But it has been an incredible amount of people reaching out. And I think that's what's took me initial time, Dan, is making sure I've gone back to everybody and spoken to everyone. And now it's just starting to follow that through. But the biggest area of people coming are those new bridging lenders are wanting somebody to come in and help set them up. But I appreciate every comment. But as soon as I find out, Dan, we'll get it out on RM TV. But it isn't. It's a stressful time, and sometimes, you know, when you're faced with, you wake up in the middle of the night and think, shit, I haven't got a job. At least I'm not old. At least I'm young. I'd hate to be in my 50s looking for work. That's for sure. Though age should never come into it. You sometimes have to stop and think there's an awful lot of people in a worse off situation than you. And I'm lucky. So we'll just have to watch. But at the moment, I don't have anything specific that I can say, yeah, I'm pretty confident right now. But thank you.
No, but that's exciting. And you've obviously got a big audience and a big following, and everyone's wishing you well. As you said, I've seen the comments on social media, and you'll fly into something, and everybody knows your skill sets, really. So it's just waiting for the right thing to come. But I'm sure everybody on this call will wish you well, and they'll be excited to see where you pop up next, whether it's a new bridging lender that isn't a cowboy, or within distribution. But I'm sure we'll all see you soon. So yeah, I mean, John, do you want to wrap this up, and then we'll say our goodbyes?
Yeah, no worries. As I said, same comments as I opened with. Changes coming in the tax world. The same planning needs to be looked at. I'm still getting loads of questions about incorporating and whether I should or not. And the recent changes have added a little bit of an angle to that in terms of, well, there's a little bit less tax to pay, potentially a little bit more stamp duty. So people who are starting off in this game should potentially look at partnerships just to give themselves the flexibility to try and save stamp duty later down the line. I think, from my point of view, going to be an interesting year. I don't know what tax changes will make the cut if there is a change of government. I do know that when there is a change of government, there is a budget within 3-4 weeks, which will no doubt bring about a whole new range of changes.
Yeah.
As the Chinese say, interesting times.
Perfect. No, thank you for that. Yeah, I'm sure well, realistically, there's going to be a change of government. There's kind of no ifs or buts about that, but we'll not discuss politics. So, Rog, thank you for your comments.
Back in politics.
John, again, thank you for your vast array of knowledge. Obviously, you answer every single question perfectly, so thank you very much. And for me, look, just to wrap it up, it's this year, I think it's all about diversity and having a great team around you. And I'm not talking about a team that you work with, but that's part of your business. I'm talking about casting the net wider and the third parties you work with, whether it's a phenomenal tax advisor like John and his firm, whether it's a social media manager like Rog, or whether it's a distributor like ourselves, but just make sure that you do have some good people in your corner that can add value to your business and you never miss out on anything or any part of a transaction for your client. We will return in June for episode 3 of this season. I have no idea what we'll be discussing because it's down to you guys. There'll be a little bit of content and teasers in the emails, but please do make sure you join and register, get your CPD, earn some points, but more importantly, just educate yourself around the market and the changes because there's always some great content in these sessions. So with that being said, I wish you all a great day and a great weekend, and we'll catch you soon. So, gents, thank you for joining.
Thank
Dave,
you.
Our head of marketing, thank you for hosting, and you attendees, thank you as well. So all the best, have a great day, and see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care.